There, this is Freethought Forum. It's a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. And I'm Joe Barnhart, and welcome.
And I am Imam Fatah, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and unfettered by supernatural beliefs.
Okay.
On today's shows, we'll be speaking about versions of faith.
And first, we'll tell viewers about the show's sponsors. So, what do we got for sponsors this time? The Atheist Society of Knoxville has fun meetings at the bar or eatery. Tonight's meeting is a new location. It's Don and Gall's Mexican Grill. Is that Gal? Or
Don Gal, I guess.
Don Gal's Mexican Grill on 10681 Hardin Valley Road here in Knoxville. And meet there with the silver jacket copy of the book, The God Delusion. And but if you plan to preach and proselytize, it's supposed to be a good time together. And don't punch.
Don't punch.
Okay.
Don't punch. The Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regularly monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings of the month are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The second Sunday we hold the Skeptics Book Club. On the fourth Sunday we're mixing it up, sometimes with a potluck, get-together in a member's home, which we call Reflections Meeting.
Okay. And later in the show, we'll give you our website, including times and locations. And do we have anything in the news? I don't have anything in particular, do you?
Well, I really don't, no.
Not going on.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to our discussion.
All right.
And on versions of faith. And what do we mean by faith? When you use the word faith just in ordinary language, how do you use the word?
It's a multifaceted word.
Yeah.
And I think for me personally, I use it when I have a trust in something.
Sure.
Big trust in something.
Yeah, I had an uncle that I had faith in to drive me when I was a boy.
Mm-hmm.
I had another uncle, I was a total skeptic. I wouldn't get in the same car with him.
Yeah. So what you're saying is each one has inside faith and skepticism.
Exactly. Everybody is both skeptic and has faith. You couldn't function without both.
Correct.
Everybody is a believer and everybody is an unbeliever because nobody believes in just everything.
Correct.
And in fact, if you believe in X, there's a good possibility you're not going to believe in Y because they might cancel each other out.
Mm.
So it's necessary to know what you believe and what you are skeptical of, or unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, even if for agnostics or atheists, we usually put our own set of personal beliefs.
Exactly.
That we abide with.
Yeah.
And we have faith in those beliefs, which is our, moral conduct or the way we function.
Yeah. I have a lot of friends who are Christians.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot in common. I have a good Muslim friend in Texas. We have a lot in common because this person in Texas is a humanist in the values.
Mm-hmm.
These Christians I know, many of them are humanists. Most of my atheist friends in this part of the country are humanists. There are some atheists who are not. So I have more in common with some of these Christians and Jews and Muslims than I would some atheists. And we talked about this in other programs.
So when you say humanist, what do you mean by that?
In other words, you have human values. You ask, what is it that makes people happy, secure, what gives them a good relationship in a community so that you can have trust and confidence. Mm-hmm. If you're driving a car, I want to count on you. I want to trust you, and you want to trust me. Mm-hmm. And that's Without that, you could not have a community.
Yep.
You couldn't have a marriage.
All right.
Now, we've got a phone call already. That's good. Go ahead. Our phone caller.
Well, hello, this is Faithless Forrest.
Uh-huh.
I saw the subject for today's show, and I know you haven't gotten into it to speak of yet, but I'm reminded of a show that I did many years ago where one of our viewers called in and offered an idea, a definition for the word faith that was kind of surprising for me. And the usage of the word faith has one of implying loyalty. We say someone is faithful when they're loyal, and or full of faith, implying loyalty. And of course, when I was on that program, I was saying that believing things on faith, and by that I meant without evidence, is a recipe to make mistakes about the real world around us. And I think because he had an alternate, let's say, principle view of what faith meant to him, we were kind of talking past one another for a while.
Yeah, we have a phrase that identifies with what you're talking about. It's called blind faith.
Yeah.
And that we usually say that can be a very reckless and dangerous thing to do.
Well, and so his point was that loyalty was a good thing, and even that, if I had understood it more correctly during the show, I think actually he came down to speak with us at Barley's, and that's where we kind of cleared up our misunderstanding. Is that if he had said that being faithful is good, I would say, well, no, even that is situationally dependent.
Exactly, situationally dependent. It's good, but
there were people in Nazi Germany who were not faithful to the party line and shielded, victims of the Holocaust and saved them. And so it's situationally dependent. They were being faithful to humanity, not to
at all
an authority figure. Yeah, and of course, if blind faithfulness to a god is asked, and that God is an evil God, well, then that's bad news as well.
Yeah. By definition, if the name God is supposed to be good, and if it's evil,
yeah, and it's really interesting because, if you treat God, just the concept of God, was the same way we were talking right now, being faithful based on the situation, then I might not have even problem with that. But the issue is once you start giving God power and giving him this supernatural belief, these great powers that he possesses, then you start adding the blind aspect that you have to trust him, or trust in this concept all the time.
Well, and that's part of why I avoid using the word God. I would say Yahweh, because Yahweh carries with him certain baggages, like he once, if the Bible be true, he once drowned, all but 8 people.
Yeah.
And
he wasn't angry, he won.
Well, that's what you'd call a sociopath.
Well, the rhetorical question is sometimes raised, why should I take the advice on someone on how to raise my children who once had to drown almost all of his own?
And the contradiction in that theory is this so-called deity is supposed to be omniscient.
Yeah.
Why would he have brought into all those people in the world in the first place if he knew that most of them were going to be strangled to death?
Unless he likes killing.
And that's what I mean by...
I think there is a phrase, drunk with blood, is there not?
Yeah. And that's...
or maybe just drunk without blood. So it depends on the mood.
Ended up in blood, like drinking and driving.
Yeah. So, of course, most of my perspective about this comes from having read the Christian Bible. Imam, are there things from the Quran that you might know to remark on that those of us who come, even me a non-believer, but from a Christian
background?
Goodness, what is the term? Culturally Christian. I am culturally Christian, even though I've never been a believer. So there are things that we might not know about the Quran that maybe you think we should, whether it's surprising or?
Well, really, like, so God in the Quran, it's really like different a little bit.
Yeah.
So there is not much contradiction in the ideology of God in the Quran, because really it's pretty vague, and even that the stories about Judaism in the Quran, like the whole story about Moses and all this, it is done in a way that is very general, that there is no details in it, so you cannot extrapolate from it that he's, that he
Yeah, well, that's an old
committed
rule.
these crimes.
If you have specifics, you can't be contradictory. because
Correct.
You don't say anything.
So the contradictory comes in the personality of Muhammad, because that's when you start, like when you try to explain the Quran and you start looking into the text outside of the Quran, which we call hadith, or the sayings of Muhammad. That's when you start running into the contradictions, really, of he was a warlord, he was a pedophile. He married a 9-year-old.
He was
at
also
the same time, some saying that talks about his sexuality, how strong he is sexually, and some other saying that talks about some of the lack. But and that's when you start seeing that, man, this is like whoever wrote this text. It's been written like across a long period of time with different people that try to basically use it as a way to justify their own personal actions, which is, during the Abbasi era or the Amawi era.
During what era?
During the Amawis and the Abbasi eras. So that's during like so after Muhammad's death, presumptually, there came 4 people that took the kingdom from him. Umar, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. And then after this started the Amawi through Muawiyah. And then after the Umayyad empire came the Abbasi empire. So this is the era where the Islamic empire was the maximum, and they started expanding all over the world. And also this is the time when you start looking at actually historical evidence, and there's actually different books outside right now that talks how really there is no documented evidence of Islamic belief existing before Muawiyah, and that's even Muawiyah himself was. Some people say that he was Christian, and they wanted to separate themselves from the Byzantine Empire.
But would you agree that early on Islam seemed to reject the notion of the Trinity?
Correct. I mean, till now it rejects the notions of Trinity.
Yeah, and
well, wouldn't that be because it rejects the idea of the divinity of Jesus?
That's exactly.
Correct.
They were in that sense they were Unitarian. That Jesus has one nature rather than 2.
Yes. So it is basically one nature, that he's a human and he's a prophet.
And he's not a divine.
Not a divine figure. Yes.
So I wanted to share with you the definition of faith that at least one of our viewers had in the past that caused some miscommunication. And let me clear the line. I hope you get some more callers.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. That's a good example of even the belief of Muhammad is couched in skepticism regarding the Trinitarian view. He's a skeptic. All belief entails skepticism.
Correct.
You can't be a believer without also being a skeptic of other things.
Well, and if you project it in the idea of faith, you're a skeptic about any other faith.
Any other faith, yeah.
So you have a blind faith in your own beliefs and skeptic about everyone else.
And it's inevitable if you do that.
I know, yeah, especially when you go to this.
And you have, within each religion, you have different versions that develop. The same within atheism. There's a great difference between Karl Marx and Stalin. Stalin's view seemed to me is pretty much close to Hitler's. I mean, even though he was doing war, but Marx was trying to understand the difficulties that the laboring people were having, and alienation from their. He used the word alienation from their work. In other words, they couldn't put their heart in their work, because they just had to work at something they weren't into because they wanted to. That's just the best they could get. And he understood their psychological problem. And I don't think Stalin was really interested in that. I mean, he was more interested in just power.
Yeah.
Even though they both were called communists.
Yeah. So you're talking about the variation between interfaith.
Good, yeah. Variations.
Yeah, I mean, just coming from the Islam, you have the Sunnis, you have the Shi'is, and you have the Sufis, and everyone is completely different.
It's a good point. Different denominations.
Yep, and different versions of the Islamic faith.
Yeah. All groups that try to organize like that, they find that there's diversity among them and differences of opinion.
Yeah. So what is non-belief? I guess that's the second point.
Okay, it's pretty simple. It's if you believe X and X is contradicted by Y. For example, if I told you I were a doctor, a physician, you might say, I better investigate before I let you do my tonsils or my appendix. And I would hope you would be a skeptic and say, well, Joe, you say you're a physician, but I don't have evidence.
Yeah.
So in that sense, all faiths are commitments.
Correct.
In that sense, they make claims of truth. And once you do that, you're putting your claim out there for investigation.
Yep. And I'm gonna take this in a different route.
Good.
Because I see some parallels here of what's happening right now, especially in U.S. and this whole scene of politics. That actually people start turning politics into faith and beliefs. That actually, if you have a certain association with a specific party, you're completely blindly faithful to this party, that you don't see basically what's wrong or what's right in each of these parties. So I start seeing that even like some parallels between politics and religion.
Well, this is because that they are human beings.
Yeah.
And then once you get power, it's important if you get power to have critics.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll start believing everything that comes out of your mouth, and it's to your own advantage to have critics.
Correct. Yeah, and I think also it falls back into faith provide comfort to people, and so is having someone with the same ideology.
Sure.
So you start actually identifying more and more and more with this specific ideology, that at some point you just become completely brainwashed with it.
Yeah, we all like to have reinforcement and encouragement.
Yeah.
But if we build into it, also say, I don't want you to be a fool, Joe. And if you make foolish statements, I'm your friend. I'm going to try to correct you.
Correct. I will take everything with a skepticism and actually investigate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can make a religion out of skepticism itself.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it's part of my personal belief, it's being a skeptic. And
but you are also a believer in a lot of things, aren't you?
I am.
Are you married?
No.
Well, if you were, you'd be a believer.
In what?
In your wife.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be married to her.
Correct.
In fact, I have, this past week, Mary and I have been married 63 years.
Oh, congratulations.
But I want to emphasize, we dated 4 years
Yeah.
before we committed ourselves
Yeah.
to that. And we made up our mind when we got married that we would try to change together.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to be married to somebody 22 or 3 the rest of my life. And she didn't either.
Yeah.
So you have to develop together and keep in communication with each other.
Yeah. So can we like try to project faith into cultural conditioning?
Well, all cultures do that, sure.
Yeah.
They have to, otherwise they wouldn't survive.
Yeah.
We used the example of driving. We have to trust the other person to know the laws and to abide by them. Now, we aren't fools. I mean, driving today, I had a truck too close to me on behind. I thought, well, this wet, pavement, that's too close. So I slowed down until he got the message to back off. And I noticed myself, I'm getting too close to the driver in front of me. So I had to correct myself. So part of faith is a commitment. But if we're also committed to reason and evidence, then that has to come in to make an impact on our other beliefs.
The reason why I tried to say projected into culture, because that sometimes there are certain actions that humans do based on cultural acceptance that is not associated with reasoning. So this is why I was... So if we say try to associate it only with reason, then there is different things that we do based on some cultural conditioning that is really not associated with specific reasoning, but it's more like this is what the society dictated, and you have faith in the society, so that's what you follow.
Well, I spent 41 years in Texas. Texas in the 19th century, they would just hang you. You wouldn't necessarily.
I saw those old Western movies.
And so you have to. Part of faith, to make faith work, you have to trust the critical process in order to revise our commitments. Otherwise, we are going to presume that we can't make mistakes, and that's a mistake. So trust is part of being human. If you didn't have trust, you couldn't survive in a community. If you didn't have skepticism, the community wouldn't work, because we all make mistakes and we all need to have
Then
correction.
we're not going to correct ourselves, exactly.
Exactly.
Yep.
You need it takes you want a friend who will help you make your corrections.
Exactly, and I will take this and project it again on the scientific method. So in the scientific method, basically you come up with a hypothesis, and then you have your empirical evidence, which is basically devise an experiment. That's when you're getting skeptical about this hypothesis. And then when you have the data to support the hypothesis, then you accept this hypothesis. Till another hypothesis come out, or a different type of data come out that invalidate this. Then you start changing your hypothesis, or So it's
that's why falsification of a theory is so important. It makes usually our views are falsified in part, and we make small adjustments. And sometimes we make so many small adjustments, we look back and we've made major changes only by making small adjustments along the way.
And I think this is really great point, because I think it's one of the biggest addition to any person's journey of self-growth is having skepticism and being able, as you go, you correct yourself and not have the I call it the religious cockiness that I'm absolutely right and I cannot be wrong. Whereas you accept that your views can change based on new evidence that come, and then you can say, okay, I don't believe in this anymore, or I'm not don't accept this anymore, and then you basically start
precisely to believe is also to be open for skepticism.
Yeah.
And criticism. So because you want to improve your theory or your commitment.
Mhm.
And one reason I'm glad Mary and I dated 4 years is so that if I had an idea of who she was, I could at least correct it, or she could correct it about me. And then we had friends who knew both of us,
you, yeah.
so she could consult with other people. What do you think about this guy?
Yeah.
And get another opinion.
Uh-huh.
And that's good. And sometimes you'd say, well, I made a mistake. I don't think we should get married.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's what the engagement period is for, is basically to test to see if you've made a wise choice.
Yeah. So I think we have also another point we didn't get a chance to touch on last time, and maybe we can get into a little bit the word spirituality.
Spirit, yeah.
And especially like from agnostic or atheist point of view about the word spirituality itself.
Boy, isn't that an interesting word that's shifted all over the map?
I know. Especially right now, I notice that a lot of atheists and agnostics, they treat this word in a more of like in a bad connotation kind of thing, you know. So what is your thoughts about spirituality?
Well, if you take the etymology, it comes from the word spirit, but that comes from the word wind. And pneuma, or ruach, depends on what language you're in.
Yeah.
But it originally meant wind. And I think they were trying to say at that point, there's something there that you can't just observe necessarily.
Yep.
But later this word gets to be changed and modified. Sometimes spirituality depends on the person you're talking with. It might mean certain values you're committed to, not to spooks or not to the wind or ghosts, but values. And for others, it means a God or angels or whatever. So it depends on who you're talking with.
Yeah, I see it not, and I think the bad connotation come when people start associating it with belief in a spirit, which I don't believe in that. But it's not that I don't believe; it's just there is no evidence for a spirit. So so far, but I think aspect of it is basically. As you mentioned, it is a set of belief in a higher set of, set of values beyond just what we observe.
Kindness, you can believe in kindness.
Yeah, and that can be a source of spirituality for you, like compassion. That's a source of spirituality. And I try to associate it more with a higher state of conscious.
I got you. Now, what you're pointing out is people use this word to mean different things, and my job is to try to find out how they're using it. That's why I like anthropologists. They study a society. They don't go saying, "Well, your people are different from me. You must be wrong."
Yeah.
No, you find out how they're solving their problems, how they use their language, and what it means to them. And maybe you can learn from them.
Yeah.
Even where you differ on some things, on other things, they may teach you something you haven't thought of.
Yeah. Can we tie spirituality with emotions?
Sure. If you say the meaning of the word is the way people use it, sometimes the word spirituality means emotions, like compassion. Calm is with, to feel with someone. Yeah, and most people that are half civilized recognize that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it...
Dogs can do that somewhat. It depends on the dog. But go ahead, you were saying.
No, I was just trying to circle back to the point here, which is, from my... I'm just going to share it from my perspective. Which is, I think if you're just all what you, as humans, there is a big component of us that is tied with emotions, and our relationship with others. so it's not just a matter of facts, and I'm only gonna act in everyday life based on,
Well,
the
emotions
facts.
is part of being human.
Correct.
And as a matter of fact, emotions are facts about human beings.
Yes. Yeah.
Otherwise,
It's
we're
part
just,
of being a human. This is just a machine.
Otherwise,
yeah.
you're just a machine. Yeah.
Exactly. So for me, spirituality, it's basically projected on this emotion and, the higher state of consciousness.
The
as I
part
like
of
to-
being human that makes you human is
Correct.
okay. See, now we can see how you use the word,
Mhm.
and other people won't use it that way, but that's
No.
okay
Yeah.
as long as we know what we're talking about, and that's fine. It
Yeah.
seems to me.
Uh,
A fundamentalist, whether he's an atheist or a theist fundamentalist, can't sometimes adapt to the fact that other people use the language differently, and your job's try to understand the person in the first place.
yeah. Well, yeah. So that I guess that takes us back to our next point, which is atheist fundamentalists.
Yeah. Well, it's a parallel to Christian fundamentalists. Some Christian fundamentalists hold to the notion of original sin, and unless you're converted out of that, then you're all suspect, and you can't make a good relationship with them because that's your original sin.
Mm-hmm.
And some atheists think if you have original ignorance,
Yeah.
then, in other words, if you have a view different from them, you can't learn from them.
Yeah.
And I think that's a kind of fundamentalism it's not an advantage. I mean, I had an aunt who was a fundamentalist Christian. She was loaded with common sense. Her religion, that aspect of her religion, was, in my opinion, just baloney.
Mm-hmm.
But she had used that religion in such a way as to make it really workable.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I remember as a kid, and I must have been about 16, reading a fundamentalist preacher. And I realized he had an aspect in his book that made a lot of sense, even though it undercut his fundamentalism.
Mm-hmm.
It made a lot of sense, but he didn't realize how much sense it made.
Yeah. When you say made a lot of sense, in what perspective?
Okay, he was trying to show that religion, from his point of view, shouldn't be just constant doing brownie points, trying to prove that you really are perfect and all that. And he had a notion of justification by faith. By the way, it should be translated justification by faith, by trust.
Mm-hmm.
Learn to trust, from his point of view, the deity.
Mm-hmm.
If you translate it from a secular point of view, learn to trust the community you're living with.
Mm-hmm.
If you select the right community, then develop a trusting relationship, and they will trust you. And you can. I mean, otherwise you're going to be paranoid the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But this preacher made a lot of sense in the way he developed this notion of justification by faith, which he got from Martin Luther.
Mm-hmm.
And I translated it, and then I kept translating it into a more secular viewpoint. But psychologically, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You see.
Yeah.
And an anthropologist would appreciate it. He wouldn't accept the whole baggage, but he would see, yeah, it's very insightful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's I saw fundamentalism, coming from Egypt. Fundamentalism was all around me, and I guess it depends on what is the background of the religion you come from. Sometimes it can be more dangerous coming from the Islamic fundamentalism, but really the basis of it, as you said before, it is the belief that you are 100% correct, everyone else is wrong, and I cannot accept their point of view. It's not just even accepting their point of view. It can go beyond that it actually, you can strip them from their humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they don't follow the same point of view.
You demonize them.
Demonize them. And that actually give you reasoning to go and commit certain crimes.
Exactly.
And this can be fueled by religion, race, any type of fundamentalism.
This fundamentalist aunt I had, the preachers liked her because she had so much common sense that they realized that if it were not for people like her, they'd be totally nuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was a good sounding board so that they could hear themselves and see that, well, it wasn't as sane as they thought sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think atheist fundamentalists, they are different from the religious fundamentalists that majority of them, they will not, commit violent acts.
That's their Joseph Stalin.
Yeah.
They do it wholesale then.
Yeah.
But most of the atheists that
Most
we know
will
wouldn't
not.
do that. No, of course not.
But at the same time, I think that their actions sometimes can hurt the cause of basically expanding the base of being a skeptic.
Yeah, I got you.
Because really, like, from my point of view, if you start approaching a believer and you were able to slowly breach into their like bubble and just put the root of skepticism, that they can start adopting this concept of skepticism in even smaller steps.
Well,
that will be an achievement than basically going around and basically
tell them where they're wrong.
Yeah, tell them like they're absolutely wrong, and even like it goes back beyond to this, making fun of them and.
I agree with you. Making fun of people is no way to communicate.
Yeah.
Would you agree that one way is to try to find out what you have in common? That's what I like humanism.
Yes.
See, because I find among some fundamentalists, they have some humanistic values that you can relate to, and that's what you can plug into and help them to see that some of their fundamentalist religion might be undercutting their own humanism.
Yeah. And this is really a great point, because I think people should focus on their common, because we as human, we tend to basically get shut down when we look at the differences. When you start looking at the commonality and the common base, then actually start opening yourself to even like listening to this other person than shutting yourself down. And I use this concept in the last few months, even talking about politics, so avoiding talking about the specific differences, but generalizing it and talking about the common set of values that is common between everyone. And that smooth out conversation actually start make you even get into a dialogue. But if you start your conversation by having an idea that this is what's different between this is the wall that we can cross, then
that's what the word dialogue means. It's back and forth.
Correct.
Learning for each other.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. We're on our program break, are we?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Are you number one or two?
I am.
Go.
All right. So in case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions.
And these programs are live, and we hope they're lively. And from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time in Knoxville on this community television, channel 12 or 194, depending on your local cable network. And so tell your friends at ctvknox.org.
And today's show is live on January 3rd, 2017. And Happy New Year's, everyone.
Oh, yeah.
And you can call on the number on our screen and speak with us. While we take a short break, please watch the informative video about our sponsors.
Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org. If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun.
Or ask meets 1 or 2 times a week. We have evening meetings, fun, food, and drink and conversation. And so try knoxvilleatheist.org. And the purpose is to have a friendship and outreach in the community for atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in East Tennessee. And the new location is in the Don Gallo Mexican Grill on Hardin Valley Road. I'm going to have the meeting there.
Yep. The second Sunday of most month is the Rationalists of East Tennessee Skeptic Book Club. The title of the next book is Islam and the Future of Tolerance, a dialogue, January 8th, 2017. And it's by Sam Harris. Sunday, January 8th at 2 p.m. The public is invited to participate. You need not have read the book to attend, but of course it helps. Visit rationalist.org to find the rest of the calendar of books and join us at our location at Books A Million, 8513 Kingston Pike, Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yeah, good. Islam and the Future of Tolerance, a dialogue. That's what we were
Dialogue, yeah. Actually,
Dialogue.
that's perfect to what we were just discussing.
So it's better to dialogue rather than kill each other off, because if we're not careful, we'll learn from each other.
Yeah, and this is actually the best part about dialogue and actually exposing yourself to different views.
That's a good point, yeah.
Because me personally, and just as a scientist, you really start, when you are confronted with someone with different views, that's when you start working on either trying to solidify your views more, and so that you can able to respond to this person, or actually learning personally how can you debate, which is really pretty great skill to have in life in general. So having a dialogue, it adds to you as a person, and I think it's being surrounded with different views is part of the process of self-growth.
Well, that's why we all go to school, is try to get different views, not just to repeat what we've already believed. That's a ritual. That's not an education.
That's indoctrination, yes.
Yeah,
and this is what happens when you start just all what you listen to are the same views you basically believe in, or,
I've often said that open-mindedness is multiple indoctrination. In other words, I get indoctrinated into this and indoctrinated into that, and and then you can cross-breed and compare and contrast and see what each has to offer.
That's actually, I like that. And I guess I like it because it's how I think about things.
Well, yeah.
Because when I'm first presented by an idea, I am skeptic about it, but at the same time, I start opening to it and actually try to absorb it.
Yeah. Well, that's
till I find another idea, and then start opening up and absorbing, and then now you start crossbreeding between these ideas and see what is right and what's
I
wrong.
like that crossbreeding. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's we in the previous program we talked about empathy,
Mm-hmm.
and that empathy is it's like compassion. You try to get inside another point of view.
Yep.
See, well, this is a human being. They're trying to solve their problems. Let's see how they do it, and what can I learn from it?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you learn something that you hadn't even thought of.
Yeah.
And then you might learn something, boy, that's dangerous. I better not get into that. You see, this.
Mm-hmm. I think like going back to the just a point of fundamentalism and atheism.
Uh-huh.
I see there is phases that especially people that grow up in different belief system, especially those with indoctrinated or cultish belief system. You go through phases when you leave the religion.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the first phase when you start rejecting everything around you, that's when you start falling a little bit into the atheist fundamentalism. And like I personally was in this phase myself, when I first left my religion. But I think some of us are able to step out of this, and some just takes them longer, or some just decide that this is what they want, and they just.
But I had the good fortune after leaving college. I went 3 years in the theological seminary.
Mm-hmm.
And these were very open-minded teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to get a lot of good insights from a frame of reference that's not my frame of reference anymore. But the insights I got were utterly profound.
Mm-hmm.
And I can translate it into a more secular perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm very grateful to these guys and these women who taught from their point of view. It gave me a lot of insight that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah.
And I mentioned anthropologists. I had a good opportunity at the University of North Texas. I had anthropology teachers, and I could learn from them about other cultures and see how they had ways of solving their problems.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them, I could learn from it.
Yeah.
Even though I wouldn't. For example, I could learn from people from India, even though I don't believe in reincarnation.
Correct.
It makes no sense.
Yeah.
But I can see how they're trying to solve some problems in their framework,
Yes.
and it's very insightful.
Yeah, it is insightful because it shows you how other humans thought to solve a specific problem.
Yeah, a specific problem. I like
Yes.
the way you put that. Yeah,
Yes.
because you got to get specific in some of these problems.
Yes, because this is really, you need to project. I think sometimes you have to have the context around, and this is where the specific problem comes in, because you start putting context of this set of beliefs or set of actions.
Ann and I just had a friend of ours, I think I mentioned on the program, calling us from India.
Mm-hmm.
She had been my student years ago and got to know Marianne, and she just remembered that we had good relationship. And there she is from India, and I don't know whether she still holds to reincarnation or not, but she has a lot of insight in other areas that were very helpful to us. And I think we were helpful to her.
Interesting thing, going back to the similarity and having the dialogue. When I start, discussing with my own father, which is he's still Muslim. When we pass the fact that he's still Muslim and I'm an atheist or I'm an agnostic, then we start talking about common framework. Because he comes from Sufism, which is it's a mystic belief in Islam. So it's a full of philosophy, and it really it's not one of those literalist Islamic beliefs like the fundamentalist Muslims. So really, we start finding a lot of commonalities, and we agree on some of the notions, even when we talk. But he comes from his background and his belief, and I come from it from my current background, which is from agnostic.
You have the same thing in Buddhism. You have what's called Mahayana Buddhism, and that's the insights of Buddhism, but it's a theistic view. That's Mahayana Buddhism. But you also have Theravada and Hinayana Buddhism, which has all the insights of Mahayana without the theism or the God view. And so they interact with each other. And I have a friend who's a psychologist, but he's also a Theravada Buddhist, not a Mahayana. And he has a lot of psychological insight that he got from that culture.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm appreciative of anthropologists as they open our minds to other cultures to see how they've been enculturated and what can we learn from them.
So I want to spend we have a couple of minutes left, but just spend those couple of minutes and let's see what can we tell people, how can they start dialogue? How can they approach others to actually start this dialogue?
Oh, Carl Rogers, a famous therapist, says, have the third ear, learning to listen. That's hard for all of us. Is sometimes put into other words, when a person talks, say it in other words to make sure that they understand that you understand. And if you haven't understood, then they can make a few corrections.
Yeah.
And that's work.
Yeah.
To try to understand another person.
Yeah. I like this a lot because I think most humans, when we try to approach others, and especially when we're, in a specific discussion, most of the time you don't even listen to what the other person say. You're thinking, what are you going to say? So approaching this point was basically trying to set your own thoughts aside for a second and try to listen to this person with an open mind. And then at the end of when they finish, then you can start making your thoughts about his or her argument.
Yeah, my wife says you can't disagree with a person unless you know what they're talking about.
Exactly, unless you actually listen to what they are talking about and giving them a chance to finish what they are talking about.
Well, how far are we from closing?
We still have about 30 seconds or so, but
it's time to start wrapping things up. You get your pen right there. That's where you are.
Yeah. Well, it's time to start wrapping things up. Get your pen and paper. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by Atheist Society of Knoxville and Rationalists of East Tennessee.
And you can give us feedback by voicemail. And here's a number, 865-272-9060, or email Freethought Forum, that's all one word, Freethought Forum, @yahoo.com.
You can see this show on Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on this Knoxville station and online at ctvknox.org.
Yeah, and the opinions expressed are our opinions, and so we won't pass the buck over to other people. So we'd like to thank Sam here for keeping us on track and others and for technical support.
Nuns, those who identify with no religion and the fastest growing religious group in America, right here in East Tennessee, the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee are places you can find the fellowship and fun.
Okay, well, we hope that our conversation has been useful to show that fundamentalism in the sense of being too closed is not very fruitful. And the person's got to communicate with himself. And that means even listen to yourself sometimes. And then
and actually having a dialogue with your own self.
Yeah, that's work sometimes. Sometimes you say, did I actually say that? And that's what a friend can do, can say, do you really mean that? And that's helpful to you. Well, maybe you say, I didn't really mean that. And so you have to back up.
So just remember to have open mind and open dialogue with others.
And thank our audience for being patient with us. And see you next week.